Yeah, I mean, I think, you can never, the future is always more complicated than any ideological agenda imagines it. So, right at this moment, even as we're reaching toward virtual reality and immortality and whatnot, there are people scarifying themselves in the rainforest tonight and beating the log drums, and nothing has changed. So yeah, it's really about stretching out over a broader and broader spectrum. I have no problem with the people scarifying themselves in the rainforest. I'm all for that. What I don't like is the bulge in the middle of the snake, where millions and millions of people are narcoticizing themselves on mall culture and television. I mean, I'm not going to launch a moral crusade to take away people's daytime TV watching, but I certainly think, that the basic thing is to build the tools, and then the smart people will use those tools to push the edge of novelty forward. And who are the smart people?
Okay, so it is the edge.
Well, it's not.
It always has been.
But it's.
Kings and all that.
Well, no, it's not an elite of class or an elite of money, although both of those things play into it. It's an elite of technological intelligence. There will be people in the slums of Shanghai who will be world leaders in this field simply out of their tenacious intelligence. That wonderful thing Gibson says in Neuromancer, the street finds its own uses for things. So in a way, it's the confounding of of the other forms of hierarchy. In other words, class-based institutions, money-based institutions, race-based institutions are all having a very difficult time keeping up with what's going on. It seems it's more like a kind of anarchistic or chaotic situation where very creative individuals can move very fast. Cyberspace is a land of opportunity. We see example after example of this. People object and say, that the cyberspatial revolution is happening among white people and very classist and at the top of the social pyramid, and that there is an element of truth to that, but counterbalancing that is the observation that many, many people have made that, no technology in history has fallen in cost as quickly and reached so many people as quickly as computers have. I mean, the computer of incalculable cost, hundreds of millions of dollars in 1950, is now $800. And this cost-benefit curve shows no end of slowing down. I mean, I look forward to the day when the equivalent of a new NT machine will be something that you'll put on your thumb like a decal. And these things will cost 35 cents a piece or $1.50 a piece. This, in principle, can be done. An ordinary piece of typing paper is 200,000 atoms thick. In a nanotechnological fabrication situation, do you know how much close packing you can do in a matrix 200,000 atoms thick? You can practically build a 747 into it if that's what you want to do. If anybody wants to say any more about that, or I will just riff a little bit on this. The reason I'm thinking about all of this is because I'm reading this book. It hasn't been published yet. It's a galley, but they wanted a jacket comment from me. This guy, some of you may know him, Eric Davis. He lives in San Francisco. He wrote for Wired and The Voice and so forth. This is definitely one of the more interesting books about cyberspatial culture. It's called Technosis. And his take, or the overarching theme of that orders this book, is the relationship of spiritual and magical and shamanic thinking to communication technologies in all times and places, and how, it's always been about communication. I mean, shamans communicate with the ancestors. They travel in what are essentially virtual realities, invisible realms, unperceived by ordinary senses, but somehow accessed through certain codes and technical procedures. And Merciliad's book on shamanism, the subtitle is The Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. The stress being on that this is a technology, that shamanism worldwide believes all kinds of things, underworlds, overworlds, gods of this, gods of that. It isn't united as a phenomenon by ideology. It's united by its technologies, which are trance, alteration of consciousness, and then it's united through its motifs, magical flight, dismemberment, obtaining of the gift, difficult to obtain, overcoming magical beasts, riddlery, poetics, all of these things. It's all about communication and language. And, indeed, the entire Western tradition is informed by this idea of the incarnation of the Word. In the Gospel of John, it says, in principio et verbum incognito, et verbo caro factum est. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then it became flesh. And this is a weird idea. I mean, this is not clear like Buddhist metaphysics or something like that. This idea of the ensoulment, or of the embodiment of the Word. What does it mean? Is mankind the Word? Is Christ the Word? Probably the answer to that question is both and. But the incarnate logos, the world as information, it's very mantric. It may even be linked over time to Hindu ideas of the power of mantra. The Hindu cosmology is basically an acoustical Pythagoreanism, an idea of tonal vibrations at many levels, and it's claimed, perhaps with truth, I can't testify for or against it, that very yogically accomplished sitar players can make a bale of hay burst into flame and things like this. The power of shabda, sound, as the manifestation of information at various levels. And in Hinduism, there isn't this sharp break between matter and vibration, between manifestation and underlying dynamic that you get in the West. In classical Vedic metaphysics, you have these things called tattvas, which are levels, is the best way to think of them. There are 36 of these tattvic levels, and they stretch from the most rarefied to the most gross, as they say. And somewhere in there, everything finds its place, and everything is an amalgam of these tattvic manifestations. Well, when you deconstruct this isn't far from the image we now obtain from quantum physics, that the density of the vector fields creates the complexity of the phenomenon, that the reciprocity of all this resonance somehow creates a hologram of shifting appearances. It's remarkable, and density. So you make your way, by pure thought, by pure speculation, or by the instrumentality of modern science and mathematical analysis. But what you come down to then is this primacy of information conceived of as a vibratory medium. One of the things going on that gives this another dimension, we've talked about it a little bit at other times in the past, but there have been developments even since the last time I was at Esalen, is this idea that it's now become very respectable in physics to talk about this thing called the Bell non-locality phenomenon, or Bell space, which is a form of connectivity that unites all space and time instantaneously. That underneath the fabric of ordinary appearances, there is a kind of what mathematicians call a coextensive continuum, a continuum where all points are cotangent with all others. Well, if you grant for a moment, or suppose for a moment, that biology can somehow pick up on this information, resonate with it, well, then you realize that, your own humble being is like an antenna plugged into the largest data bank there is, the total data bank of the existing universe. You mean to experience it all at once? Yeah, it's impossible to conceive of experiencing it all at once. It would be some form of super integrative intelligence. Enlightenment sounds good enough for it. I think maybe a more close to home concept would be that in our ordinary consciousness and in dreams and on drugs and so forth, that we contact parts of it. That this funny thing which we call the human imagination is actually like a child playing with an FM radio dial of the universal crystal radio of the Akashic imagination. And these things that come and go in dreams and visions and so forth, many of them are non-Englishable. You pour common language over them and it's like water on a duck's back. But some tiny percentage of them can at least be metaphorically captured. And so then when you tune into that station and you can hang on, you get to be William Blake or Dante or Max Ernst or, a downloader of a major coherent dollop of weird data that then the rest of us, like ants around the carcass of a cockroach, can inspect and put to our own, devour, put to our own uses. I'm interested in this thing about information because, one of the things that informs my work and, is all this stuff about time. But I've always had the sense that probably I was very naive about time myself, even as I formulated these historical collapse and expansion theories. And recently it's been put to me to think about imagine a cubic meter of space that is absolutely empty. No atoms, no plasma, no magnetic fields, no virtual fluctuations, no neutrino, an absolutely empty volume of space. Well, then imagine 10 minutes passing in that space. Well, then imagine 10 million years passing in that space. Well, then what's the difference? In other words, the point being that time is somehow, for it to exist, it depends on the referential deconstruction of relationships between events or particles or charges or something. If nothing is happening, no time is passing. Well, if that's true, then large amounts of the universe, time is not a concept until you interject it through the act of observing that particular part of the universe. In other words, time may be as rare a thing in the universe as matter. And we see how rarefied matter is, how little of it is spread between the stars, and that in some sense most of the life of the universe is almost flickeringly momentary in its endurance. It's only the atomic systems and the molecular systems derived from them that draw about themselves this prolongation of time through expression of happenstance. Is like the only way I can put it. I mean, when things happen, time springs into existence. When things are not happening, time is an unnecessary concept. Anybody have anything they want to say, or any question, or any...
Economy.
Well, if you're going to build an economy around a principle, it sounds like an infinitely expandable one is the one you want. Money is a precursor of information. You know, it was very mysterious in the Middle Ages when people began to actually study money for the first time, to think, because the Jews had been allowed to handle money, but interest was considered a sin. It was usury, the sin of usury. And then in the Middle Ages, when the bourgeois middle class began to form in urban centers of Europe, they realized that money had this mysterious property, that it would grow, that it would create more of itself without anybody doing anything. And, you know, some people thought this was divine, and some people thought it was demonic, and people were very puzzled by this quality of money. What money is a symbolic commodification of value. Information is somehow the cousin of money, although yes, essentially in an information economy, everyone is selling intelligence, not in the sense of IQ, but in the sense of central intelligence agency. In other words, people are selling what they know that you don't, that you need to know to do something. It's the only kind of economy where capitalism has a future, unless something quite radical happens, because one of the requirements of capitalism is an ever-expanding frontier of exploitable natural resources. Well, certainly the process of changing ignorance into understanding is an infinite frontier. You can mine that mountain range for generations and never make a dent. In fact, understanding is probably infinite, and since most of it remains at this point in time unelucidated, the task of intelligent life seems to be to organize inchoate nature into an understood phenomenon. You know, in Kabbalism, there's this funny idea where the certain schools of Hasids believe that everything is in the Torah, that they're in the hypothetically real archetypal Torah, everything is written. But then other rabbis say, well, then is there predestination? Are you saying that the future is written in the Torah? And they say, no, because beyond the moment of the present, the letters are scrambled. And so what time is like a moving edge of decipherment that takes the letter soup of the unorganized future and reveals what comes to pass. It's a very interesting and very cybernetic and information based idea.